Munchies, what like as you went through your crypto journey, like where did that begin, and then how did you finally land in SPX?
Yeah, so that's I my crypto journey began probably like 2014. So that's when I first learned about, or maybe 2016, but like first learned about Bitcoin and Ethereum just through I had a few friends who were doing like their PhD in uh, blockchain technology, and this is back when ETH was like $20 or whatever. Um, and so I got in like I didn't actually buy any ETH or any crypto, but I got I started with like the Bitcoin white paper, and because I tend to be like a very first principles sort of learner, I would want to go to the like original source, and went down that whole rabbit hole of like the Fed and money and like fiat currency and all that good stuff, and then after kind of understanding um, understanding Bitcoin, the next logical step was like Ethereum and smart contracts and like how like Vitalik started those things, and that was like the initial seed for. I think it carries on to what we're doing with SPX and everything. There's like a common through line, but that when like when Vitalik added this Turing complete programming language through smart contracts on top of um, Bitcoin on top of a blockchain, you just have these like stacking layers of transformative um, like affordances that uh, you get on top of on top of the internet basically. And so that was the first introduction to crypto was Ethereum. I never really bought into all the ICO and all the other alt tokens because to me they didn't really make much sense. Like Bitcoin and Ethereum were kind of groundbreaking just because like technologically they made a lot of sense. But then everything else was just like a fork of that or like some other um, some of the other vaporware like Denta coins or like Chinese Ethereum coin. Like yeah, so that was just a few years of observing and not really participating, and then fast forward after I finished the medical school and wanted to go out and explore. Um, I kind of missed DeFi summer, and then when NFT season started picking up, that's when I pivoted. Like we were pivoting our startup into like NFT trading. So it's like on the weekend, my CTO had built this like NFT trading platform, and we were just like we just had it was like a battle of kind of infrastructure, right? Like you had this cloud infrastructure that could scrape the chain for these new NFT launches and try to like snipe rarity and stuff like that. Um, and we had some fairly decent infra at that time, like to be relatively profitable. Um, and obviously, like as NFT season kind of passed away, that profit kind of went away, and then we kind of went off to do our own things again, and then just kind of joined this VC fund with a few friends, and then was also just like trying to learn that from the beginning. Looking at the types of projects at that time, it was like GameFi stuff, and there was a lot of again. It again felt like a lot of projects that were throwing around buzzwords and nothing actually that interesting was going on, right? Like it was still kind of Bitcoin and ETH in my mind were like the pillars of crypto. And then you had things like Aave and Compound and like um, the what was the stable coin USDS? What it used to be called. Anyway, they were like cool developments, but then kind of turned into like the Ponzi games, right? It's just a bunch of you just have a bunch of tech that is essentially Ponzi's wrapped up into uh, you know a new form and a new narrative that's selling DeFi, but it's actually just a Ponzi, a box that people put money in. Then I think the thing that maybe separated me a little bit is when I was doing the NFT trading, I would actually spend a lot of time just like looking at art and the collections and hanging out with the communities. And that was like a spark where I started to see, okay, there's something that's like a lot less tangible that's going on. That's a lot more like EQ. And a lot of some of these communities, they were making cool art. They had like these communities that would have interesting, interesting events or have their like very unique identity, a very unique vibe. And um, that was like something very, it seemed quite novel, but very difficult to quantify. It was a very like intangible thing. And then, VCs kind of took that and tried to like spin all sorts of like crazy narratives about like NFTs, which again was just all of a load of like BS that I didn't find very interesting at all. And finally, I think SPX uh, was kind of like an evolution of that NFT sort of culture. It took the best parts of that, um, and then solved for a lot of the problems that NFTs had, which was like, they had a fixed supply. Um, Collection would have like 10,000 NFTs, and that really locked down a lot of people. Whereas meme coins or SPX, like basically infinite supply, it can grow, it can scale infinitely, and also it took all of the elements. I mean, SPX really was. It was Harry Potter by Sonic Tenenia that was like the first one that put this sort of category, um, which was banding together a group of artists and creators and like culture with a set of values, and then distributing that out like at scale. That was like the spark for me. That made me think, okay, there's something deeper here. There's something that's actually like, it makes logical sense that it got born out of NFTs. And also something else that like stands out to me is just like, this is a super kind of contrarian area, which is something I tend to also gravitate towards.
Was it a specific person who caught your attention in the SPX community, and how did they do that? I've gone over this story where Mong is the one who pretty much introduced me to it, and sorry, go ahead.
Oh, so I had seen the project. I think first it was shared by DJ and Spartan, and that was in like September of 23. And I during that time I wasn't really paying attention to the markets and kind of forgot about it. And then I think it was a video by Nicole, like the one with George W. Bush playing golf. I'm not sure if you've seen that one, but that just like, for some reason, that just connected with me. And then I joined the Telegram, and at that point I was like quite deep in these like meme community telegrams, like the H past 10i TG, and got onto what really I think got me hooked was like the idea has its basis. Like those were just legendary. Um, seeing the just the pure dedication of like 190 spaces in a row, like that just yeah, that really changes something in how you perceive it.
So one thing, I think it's important to like outline that it pretty much just like all starts with like one person and a sort of game of telephone, because people like to, I think, make the growth of these tokens like more abstract and over complex than they actually are. And I think that, and I think if you view them in the way that like, okay, it all just starts with like hearing about it from one other person, then everyone realizes that they really are in control of, how this evolves. So yeah, that's just something that I wanted to outline.
Yeah, so Munchies, I think we've all had like a, whether it was a video or a specific meme or a person that we talked to a ton, like that, or a reply guy or some equivalent, like we've all had kind of someone that has ushered us in. But I do think that your background with kind of like the sort of the VC approach of seeing like a lot of projects that were not inspiring to you, like may have been helpful, or at least that's intriguing to me. Because obviously you learn to spot something that's differentiated from that to some extent. Was that a gradual thing, or because I know you tweeted recently, maybe it was a few months ago, sometime this year, that Ticker Bitcoin and SPX kind of, saved you from leaving crypto or kind of giving up on this space. Like, was there a specific moment that you recall, maybe outside of like that you had kind of the beginning of your epiphanies, or was that like a gradual thing that happened over time?
I would say it happened fairly quickly. So it was like, I mean, it started with the ticker Bitcoin. Like I just decided one day I would give crypto, another shot and just dive deep into what I thought was the most active sector, I guess. And I did really kind of think of it from a VC lens, which is like, okay, you want to capture, like there is basically at any point in time like a Bitcoin talk that's happening on the internet, right? Like early Bitcoin days, there is a discussion happening between these like pioneers, and it's there for anyone to find if you have the desire to look for it, and you're gonna like, you kind of, there's an element of luck and you're in the right place at the right time, but it's also, there is a digital space, there is a room, and you just need to like find that room and be in that presence. So that was like my initial idea, or my initial thought, and I started, with like joining telegrams, and ultimately the FPX telegram was just like the most special place, and really kind of brought together a lot of my previous experience, I guess. And yeah, it was just like, where is the group of people that are really kind of pushing the boundaries of crypto in the way that I think is like novel, but also, the direction that I think crypto should be going in.
Munchies, where along the way did SPX go from like just another investment for you to possibly something more? Like you've been in SPX, you said since what, October 2023?
Yeah, roughly November. Around November is when I was.
So you've been here for a while. You've stomached all. We were talking about this before we went live, but like you've stomached all the ups and downs of being in SPX and being in crypto for many years. So like, what is it? When did it transition from just another investment to something more? And what is it that sort of like keeps you here?
Yeah, so I mean, I started like I'm quite a natural skeptic, right? Like I started with a very kind of skeptical hat, and you know, I explored a few other like meme coin sort of telegrams, and you know, if you've been like really deep in those trenches, like it's a pretty dark place. Like you see a lot of you know dark, like as soon as if a telegram's not managed well, or you know like 99% of telegrams, it gets like definitely 18 plus, like it goes down really quickly. And so already there wasn't many places where I felt there was something like special, or there was some you know garden that was being tended to. And I guess it was like quite a qualitative thing. Uh, like I had the mindset of, you know, there's a Bitcoin talk, there's some kind of community out there, and part of it was just like qualitative vibe. Um, and yeah, I think it was like probably the volleyball practice, the spaces, just like what the first step was. Okay, there's something here that hasn't descended into like gore and nudity and just like being destroyed by chaos. And but the special thing was like it was quite obvious that you know when you join these spaces, people are talking about all sorts of things. Like there was like you know nurses, teachers, like tradespeople, like builders. You know, obviously some people in finance, but just like this group of misfits that we're all very switched on, all very smart, all had similar kind of values, but we're just talking about like life and interesting topics, like mixing biology with finance and every other space, every other piece of media at the time was just people talking about like price and trading and like that, like no joke, that was literally all that was available to on Twitter Spaces. It was just people complaining about price or like euphoric about price or just like you know talking price. And I mean some of these indicators just seem very basic and very simple. Uh, but yeah, I think it was. I mean, some of the discussions like Space would have on SPX Spaces and talk about you know the manifestation on the spiritual side. Actually, the Marie Rose sort of meme was I think quite impactful for me because I had personally never been quite a spiritual or religious person. Um, and for some reason, it just like instantly clicked for me why, like, almost like empathetically, I felt like I could instantly understand why religion was so important for a lot of people and why like the spiritual side was so important. And it became this, I guess, spiritual awakening in a sense. Um, yeah, that's, I guess, about it.
Are you a religious or spiritual person outside of SPX?
Uh, no, I wouldn't say. I mean, I would just say I'm agnostic.
Fair, yeah. No, I would say the same, but I obviously agree with the sentiment that there is like some form of an awakening that occurs when you spend enough time around these types of people. So yeah, I was just curious because I would say I'm similar.
Yeah, I think it is just like, as you said, spending time with other people, and you have that, like the beauty of one of the benefits of blockchains or crypto is it's a very strong sort of social technology in a way. Like you get a much deeper connection with people who you are, you know, invested with, right? Like literally and figuratively. Um, you know, that's something that the internet never had before crypto. And maybe what we're experiencing is kind of like a just a hyper empathy. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's an interesting way to describe it. Certainly when you have to endure the volatility as a group behind like a shared ideology or belief, like there's some form of like a hormonal response to that. I firmly believe because it's an intense feeling. So I think you're forced to either move closer or sell and move away.
Yeah, I was gonna like on that point, Munchies. I was gonna ask, you know, like I was talking about how you've been here for a couple of years now. You've been through all the ups and downs. There have been some people that have sort of gotten off the ride at certain points, and so like how did that affect you at those times, and like what made you keep going when like maybe some other people who at certain points were like, you know, I'm in this for the long haul, and then they get off the ride. Like what kept you going?
Yeah, so I was there just after the first debt broke. So after the 30 mil to 5 mil, that's when I just happened to kind of join in.
Mm-hmm.
But then I was there throughout the whole like idea hazard crash out and that big candle, which was like probably just as significant. And honestly, like at that point, I had such a solidified internal thesis that I was just like, oh, this does not, if any, this is like a call to action. Like, this is literally the best thing that could have happened to us because um, one thing is like, it's, it is just, if we come out of this, it is like a test for the community. And what I mean, these things didn't affect me because going back to just having that strong thesis about what was going on. I guess we can like I guess we can go into some of those things, but um, kind of carrying on from like what I'd learned from NFTs and what I'd kind of gathered. Um, it was one of the things that helped me was like I had this understanding of memetics from like Richard Dawkins, and memetics to me was like it's similar to genetics, where it's like you have this replicating idea, and then if you have like a tokenized version of that, you know, it's got built-in incentives. You've kind of manifested this like mind virus, and it will continue to grow so long as like there is something that it's not yet been resolved. Um, so yeah, I think the things didn't affect me too much because I you know had formed. There's a lot of kind of aspects to the thesis that I had already like made up in my mind.
And so on that dimension, how do you see your thesis playing out from here?
Yeah, I think it's like perhaps a good time to tie into the sort of network state
Yeah.
topic because I was just trying to think about how these things. I think one of the things that um, we do need to kind of focus on is like a lot of Murad's talks and videos point out like the current zeitgeist, which is like all the trends that all the trends in the world that are kind of playing out and going and making it difficult for Gen Z. And we don't have to repeat all of them because I also believe them all to be true. There's like decline in mental health and connection and spirituality, religion. There's a widening gap between the rich and the poor, and we can all like obviously see this and kind of feel it in our day to day. What I was thinking about is like, how do we translate that into like, the SPX fixes this, which, I've been a very big proponent of SPX fixes this and, use it sometimes like in hyperbole, but I also truly, whenever I say it, I actually do I believe it very strongly, because not just like logically, but also how I felt internally. And you see a lot of people posting about how SPXs improve their lives. And, I'm kind of, I try to like live through the words that I say. Like I try to, when I say I'm DCAing or, getting a job or working harder than ever, just so I like don't have to, and that I can keep buying SPX or keep like contributing, or don't have to like sell my position when I don't need to. There's like an element of like, I want the best for SPX. I want the best future for my family, for my kids, and like SPX is a vessel to sort of express that into the world. And a lot of what I think is the power behind SPX is because it is a vessel. It is like kind of a perfect vessel to express all sorts of like arbitrarily complex ideas, right? Like there's nothing to stop us. There's nothing to stop us from making this a vessel to, carry on these values that we believe in and carry on these like beliefs, these hopes, and these missions. Like in a prior world, you right, like the Bible is essentially like a book of values and a book of stories of how people should live and how they should work together and build a society. And civilizations have been built around the Bible, right? So there's part of what I think moves us forward is like we embrace the fact that this is a special a very kind of special vessel that there's no reason why it can't make all of it. It can't be like the thing that promotes all the values that we believe in. And so when it comes to things like, say, there's kind of like a qualitative aspect, which is the things I just talked about, which are like quite intangible. And then there's more of like a quantitative or more of like a pragmatic aspect, which is like, okay, if we do have this network of people that all kind of believe in this mission, and we have this layer of social coordination where we can, create an asset out of thin air like Bitcoin did. If we then work towards maturing that asset such that it can attract like the larger pools of capital or institutional funds, right? There is to me, there's like not necessarily like we say boomers versus zoomers, there's like a competition there, but there is this pool of capital that's looking to be allocated into new assets. And if we want better wealth distribution, we need to provide some kind of channel or some vessel for that wealth to be distributed to us. And like historically, there's been equities or like Google, Amazon. There are stocks that people that have created a bridge for traditional finance to invest into. But if let's say we are forming like a new digital nation and equity into this digital nation, and that becomes something where individuals are like contributing their paychecks, contributing their income, or they're building businesses and they're contributing their profits into this nation or this state. Like then you start getting to the territory of how this is not too different from like an independent nation state, right? Like you can have a GDP of predictable kind of income based on people who are working and investing their money, their income, and as that becomes more predictable, as that becomes larger scale, then you have like an asset that the larger capital allocators, they can start looking at and valuing, right? Like all the system really looks for is some kind of predictable cash flow, right? That even though we call them an evil system, it's more of a like indifferent system, right? Like there is a game of capitalism, and it is kind of the best game that we have at the moment, right? Like the competitive market forces force some kind of efficient allocation. So how do you kind of win the game together without destroying the game? That's kind of how I thought about in terms of like next steps. How do we get, if we want a kind of wealth distribution, it has to obey some of the rules of the game. And like, if we could all start acting as a nation where we contribute towards this asset and build it into some predictable, predictable GDP or predictable income, that is something that enables us to then be invested into by the larger pools of capital.
Just real quick, if you want to talk about persist forever, Tanz's power went out, and the stream is still persisting. He is rebooting his Wi-Fi now to get back on, but I just thought that was very fitting. What a persist forever moment there. Munchies, I had a question for you. Say you were sitting in a room with a few hundred people. It was just like a TradFi speaker up there, and you have a bunch of people that have some investing experience, almost all in stocks. Some own like your basic L1s like Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana. How do you explain SPX 6900 to them? And do you think that they would buy it? Do you think that you would be able to portray a message to a retail guy like that to buy and understand SPX?
I don't know if I am I'd have to think about this a bit. I mean, a lot of the things that have been said already, I think address this quite well. Like GME 2.0, Doge 2.0, like Bitcoin 2.0. Essentially, the most successful thing crypto has kind of come up with is like Bitcoin, right, or Doge. And I don't think it's actually very difficult to get retail in line with those ideas. Like, the Doge story of all these people got rich. That can be like quite convincing on its own. And the thing that I think SPX particularly does well is the GME 2.0 narrative. I was there for GME as well, deep in the Reddits. And that kind of energy it was a very kind of unresolved situation. And it's like, it's very telling that there's these trends of, more retail getting involved in stocks and like wanting to have a push against Wall Street. And what better way to do that than like an asset that can't, you can't turn off the buy button, right? So I think those types of stories are quite effective because they don't need proof that it can happen because it's already happened.
Yeah, and I think it's first of all, I totally agree. I think GME 2.0 is the best, most digestible pitch for SPX. And we've talked about this on this show in the past. Like I said, that the GME was like the door was left open, right? It really didn't end. There was no clean ending. And then look, fast forward to last week, and you get this Beyond Meat situation, and you see how fast it got picked up, right? Instantly. I mean, you had people that are in meme coins running over there to participate in something that will not work again. It's the equivalent of like running a flea flicker in the first quarter of a football game, scoring a touchdown, and then trying it again in the third quarter. It's not going to work twice. And it's actually really funny with that company, because if you think about Beyond Meat, at least with GameStop, people were always still playing video games. They were always going to keep playing video games. No one is eating that Frankenfood. And like that gimmick's over. But what it spoke to is like that door. It's still right there. Like people want to stick it to the man, that they want to stick it to these institutions. And to me, that was bullish, because it's like, well, they still just don't know what SPX is yet. They don't know that this is the vehicle to do that. You'll never win that game on their field. But yeah, it was just crazy to watch that happen again right away. And then what happened right away? Company issues more secondary shares to pay off debt instantly. So like not only were you getting circuit breakers, you're getting all this stuff from the institutions. The company itself is like, well, thank you. We will, like it's not going to work.
Well, I think something that's unique here that will reveal itself in time is that the intention here is very much crystallized. Whereas in these other places, the intention, at least from like a density of the people participating perspective, is like they all have sort of like different goals. Like maybe someone's goal is like a 2x or a 5x or a 10x or whatever. But like there's no crystallized sort of vision, mission, goal, or intention behind these things. And so they fail. And I think that's one of the key differentiators with something like SPX is like the intention is there and it's laid out from the outset and people are opting into this. And so, from my perspective, like Munchies, I have a question for you on the back of this. From my perspective, lindiness or like the Lindy effect of something matters a lot, because what happens is as things are Lindy, you're proving that you mean it. You're proving that you're serious about it. Like you could say, we're going to DCA every day. We're going to onboard people every day. At some point that comes to a head and it reveals itself, and it takes time. But for like projects or assets that continue to do that again and again and again, they earn trust. And as they earn trust, people sort of say, okay, yeah, these people are serious. They're doing what they say they're going to do. I can get on board with this. But I'm curious, like how you think about like the Lindy effect, and like how much that matters here.
Yeah, I think Lindy, the Lindy effect was one of the main things I would think about when I was first looking into meme coins, or when I first came across SPX, which it also relates a lot to anti-fragility, like how many times can something go down or go through volatility and come out the other end. Like in order to be Lindy, you just need to go through those early years of just like brutal, the like trauma bonding essentially.
Yeah.
And but I think lindiness, like there's something about the memetics that I find that I think is very important. Like when you have something like DCA SPX, like that's I would also talk about like the lindiness of the memes, right? Because DCA SPX is something, you know, like they told our parents, you know, our grandparents to do, right? Like it's something so pervasive. Um, and before I ever got into crypto, you know, I was learning about Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger and like a lot of those, um, a lot of, if you think about that kind of TradFi, it was also built on memes, right? It was also built on, you know, your financial advisor telling you to allocate to bonds or stocks or like have a diversified portfolio. Um, you know, diversification is in itself a meme, right? It's just some math that economists put together and taught at like MBAs, so that the MBAs could become financial you know advisors and analysts and tell their clients that this is what to do. Um, so I think SPX kind of the not just like the token being Lindy, but also the ideas and the memetics behind it. Like the most Lindy idea is basically things that are like fundamental to human nature, right? Like these are ideas that we've talked about for you know centuries, for millennia, right? And when you have memes that like replicate and grow, like what about the meme of you know persisting or being kind or um, all the values that like define what it is to be American, like freedom, liberty. Um, these, I think, when I was first like having my epiphany, these were the things that were like truly Lindy, right? Because they kind of define what it means to be human, or what it means to be a human that you want to uh, a human that you want to be. Um, so I guess like expanding on your thoughts of lindiness, but yeah, I kind of would view it in those two angles. Like one is lindiness of the asset itself, and one is lindiness of like the idea and the memetics behind that, which is what I think, you know, coins like SPX, the difference from
Yeah.
traditional assets is that they are kind of like a memetic asset. There's like ideas baked in.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, like one thing that I've reflected on over the years is like the most interesting assets that I've seen to me that have had the biggest outcomes. There's a timelessness and universality to their like sort of underlying their like underlying ideology. So like Bitcoin is like, okay, like we think, you know, money should be separate from state. It should have a finite supply and it should be like internet enabled. Like I'm being, you know, I'm simplifying here, but like that is sort of like a timeless belief that like people had in a world where like the only option was the fiat currency regime. And then like, you know, if you think about Ethereum as sort of like the next step, like people just took that one step further and they said, should money be programmable or should money not be programmable? Oh, money should be programmable. And that's sort of like a timeless belief, like, you know, that money should be programmable. And I think here, what SPX is doing is it's encapsulating these sort of like timeless values that people feel like matter to them in a lot of ways, but there's like a void in the markets and society with respect to them. And so they're like trying to find creative ways to express that, but also like reinvigorate life in them in a more meaningful way.
Yeah, I really agree. It's like I don't know that Jeff Bezos quote, which is like he thinks about he doesn't think about ideas for the next 10 years. He thinks about what's not going to change for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
And this was a big part of my understanding of SPX. Is like you have these timeless values and a way to express them. The thing with value is, so much of value is calculated these days in terms of finance and money, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that crypto is plugged into money, it was a new form of expression for these values, and you could literally vote with your dollars for what kind of like future you want or what kind of values you want to stand behind.
Yep. Yeah, and then going back to your point on the memetics, this is something I've also thought about a lot recently. The memes, or like the memetics that drive markets have changed over time. And an example of that is like if you go back to like sort of like the early days of stock market investing, you had like the Warren Buffett, Benjamin Graham value type of framework that was very, very successful. But then if you fast forward to like maybe like the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, or even, up until this day, more recently, value investors were getting killed by like quant momentum investors. And so the meme shifted from like sort of like value to more like math, quant, market, mathematical market characteristics. Like the memes that were driving the markets like actually changed. And then there's like a common through line here that I see within SPX, but I also see happening in other pockets and parallels is like, well, it seems like actually like if you look at back the last 10 years, one of the most powerful like memetic forces that is driving markets today in terms of like the biggest outcomes is these sort of like resistance assets. So Bitcoin is a resistance asset, GME is a resistance asset, Open Door, Carvana, like these things that you sort of see spiking from a retail perspective. Like these are all just other like separate instances of a similar memetic force, which is like in the bucket of resistance assets. And so I think like these leaps in terms of the memetics that are driving the market, they don't happen so often, but I think you have to like really like be discerning and try to identify when they do happen. And it's clear, it's like becoming more clear to me that this is happening. And I think this is also facilitated by things like the internet and social media and new tools and infrastructure for people to coordinate, to kind of like generate collective power, if you will. But I do think it's happening. And so I think that kind of ties back to your point about like the memetics of this thing.
Yeah, I mean, even before value investing, like the stock market was basically just gambling. You had before the Ben Graham value investing, people would just buy based off charts, and so Ben Graham actually just like shifted the game so that a different group of people make money, right?
It's interesting. Like he gave people an intellectual organizational framework for the markets at a time that it didn't exist. And this is actually kind of what I also saw when I started going down the meme coin rabbit hole, like in the middle of last year. I've talked about this on previous podcasts. Like I was watching people sort of like trying to express this dissatisfaction, but there wasn't an organizing coordination framework around it. It was just like a bunch of people gambling. And it's kind of like SPX doing to the meme coin market what Benjamin Graham did to the equity market in some ways.
Yeah, I like that. I tend to think about Bitcoin as like a low fidelity meme coin. Like there wasn't much that they could bake in. There wasn't much ideology aside from Satoshi's white paper. Like, back then the tools they had were just socially were nowhere near what we have, right? Like they could talk in the forums. There was no feed, there was no algorithm, there was no like scalability, like scaled social network, there was no video, there was no pictures. They just like had this Satoshi's white paper and a bunch of like technical stuff, and that's what formed there's like a very low fidelity, but now today we have everything is just like bumped up to like 4K, right? In terms of our social media, it is a full blown infrastructure, high speed, global. That's audio visual. The quality and the amount of information and ideas you can spread through video content or through tweets, and the scope and scale that you can spread it at, plus the like the new generation that's grown up with all this new technology and has a kind of deeper fundamental understanding of blockchains. Like, of course we were going to come up with a higher resolution, higher fidelity version of Bitcoin that just put in like so many more ideas. And so, yeah, it's like that void that there is the current zeitgeist has left a void in a lot of young people, rising mental health issues and like pharmaceuticals, like all the problems that you can think of. There's now like this kind of way to express that collectively.
I completely agree, and I think that part is very important. And you saw it to some degree with GME, like you said, the vehicle was wrong. You saw it with Occupy Wall Street before. The vehicle was kind of wrong there, and obviously we've seen it a multitude of times across like all of history. I think what's interesting, and when you guys were talking about GME earlier, Manj and Munchies, in a little bit, Matt, this popped into my head. I didn't quite realize this because I was not involved in the GME movement. I kind of just watched it from afar. But it's important, like the fact that GameStop sold games, which in my eyes are inherently kind of, escapist, kind of there's an intrinsic like counterculture involved in it, because it's sort of an expression of saying like, I want to be doing this thing in this fake world as opposed to like whatever's happening in the real world, which is not a bad thing. But obviously the shares themselves were not a very good vehicle to express dissatisfaction with the system. But the purpose of the squeeze, like the emotion behind it, became very anti-hedge fund, anti-Wall Street, anti-wealthy person. Like, it's clear that's the underlying sentiment. And the means of which the common person had to express that was obviously like a bit less serious and almost satirical, like as opposed to kind of Occupy Wall Street or something that was a little bit more tangible. And SPX takes that like an even further degree, as you were mentioning earlier with the memetics and kind of like the ways that we can express things. And I really kind of empathize with your view, Munchies, that we kind of have almost like a responsibility to kind of be high integrity and live up to our word and be the change that we want to see and walk the walk that we think has the ability to change the world. That's not an easy thing, but that is also very important to me. And I think that's something that a lot of Aeons share, is this kind of like very high integrity, very kind of serious in our lunacy view of the world. So yeah, a lot of like very profound statements in there. I appreciate your thoughts.
Yeah, I wanted to just add, like you were saying, games are kind of an escape from reality. And one of the thoughts I go back to is like, I did a bunch of research on GameFi, those things back in the day. But like SPX kind of to me feels like GameFi. It feels like an MMO RPG, not just even in the social media apps where you're raiding, and it's kind of like you have these mini bosses and you're kind of working. You've got those elements of the game, but it's also extended to like the idea that our lives are games as well. And if crypto is the score, or like if if you imagine our lives as a game, and crypto is just like a layer on top of that in the ether, you know, you can kind of bring a lot of those ideas, or bring a lot of that kind of motivation just into your own life, because you know we all benefit from the network if we're all working, being our best selves, right? Like if we are all contributing back to the network, and that network motivates us to be our better selves, and motivates us to get out of bed and work harder, and like you know, grow our business, grow our income. Like if we do all those things, and plus we have that layer of integrity deep down, which is like we believe in, you know, a lot of the Western and Eastern values that um, that makes for just a very harmonious community. Like it's just obvious that this will do well. This is a force for good, and like then you have the other layer, which is like this is also an incentivized network, right? Like if you believe strongly in those beliefs, and you know that's the core belief, that you know, the core mission that is expressed through this project, then you are incentivized to tell other people, because not just like the incentives are aligned, because you benefit, but you're also spreading an ideology that you think will improve other people's lives. Um, and so it is this responsibility to live by those values, because like that's why, you know, I felt like going back to work and like contributing to society in ways beyond just trading and making money, because like ultimately if I do what I think is the best for the future, best for the world, and I promote those values, then that is like a virtuous cycle. That is how you make a better world. And it all does kind of stem from our individual belief, right? Like to have that belief and trust that other people are going to stay accountable.
This mentality, this is like more one of the more qualitative things you were talking about, Munchies, but to me, like this mentality of optimism and like picking each other up and helping one another is so contagious. And you know, it's like if you were like you know, in boot camp, in the military, like training, and things get hard, and like you have, you know, a good team and good people around you that are like helping you to get through that. Um, it, from like an outcome perspective, it leads to better outcomes, and then from like a mentality perspective, it honestly like improves everyone's mentality as they go and attempt to do this like very ambitious and difficult thing. So yeah, I mean, this is like not really something I've seen anywhere else in other assets that I've been in the last several years. Like
Yeah,
maybe two, you know?
it's like it's like the prisoner's dilemma versus the stag hunt, right? Like
Yeah, and
yeah.
no, what were you gonna say?
No, no, it's just that most of finance is predicated on game theory and like prisoner's dilemma, competition. And I
Yes.
think the other point was like I think that's the experience for most people, that they don't have these like influences. Like increasingly, people are less religious. They're less like into sports. They're less like you know um, they have less of these influences, and that really does leave a void as people become more chronically online and like less socially interactive, because again, because you know the incentive of the system is for big tech to just segregate us into our little algorithm and just feed us our own little like videos. And so again, that's like a trend that is popping up, this void that needs you know something to fill.
Yeah, like I think one of the things that people misunderstand most about SPX is partially because there's so many assets and just so much noise out there that it's actually hard to like sift through and discern. But like that this group of people is playing the game an entirely different way. In fact, they're not even playing the same game as you guys are, like everyone else is playing in other assets. I think people miss that. And I think ultimately, you know, it reveals itself in time. But I'm curious, like, what do you think are some of the biggest misconceptions or things that people miss about SPX?
I think the biggest, like, I guess, misconception or criticism would be like, oh, it's like it would be the people who think, you know, you can't change things, right? Like human it's kind of the pessimistic view, like never marry your bags, like human nature is always the same, like yeah, the the kind of idea that like it's all just a laugh, which actually like there was a quote from the Balaji's like network state, which is basically like, yeah, okay, even if things are a laugh, right? Like if your network state is a laugh, all you need to do is look at Bitcoin and see how powerful laughs can be, right? Like a distorted like consensus reality is kind of the most powerful thing that exists, right? Like it defines basically everything. It defines our reality. So if the people who don't believe or who, I mean, it's very easy to say, oh, it's a laugh, or the people, you know, you can't expect other people to act selflessly. I guess that is true to an extent, right? Like we can never 100% trust each other. Like you can, I cannot 100% trust that other people will, you know, hold together or will be fair to everyone else. But that's the kind of risk that I take, or that's the risk that I accept because yeah, all I can really control, like, you know, you focus on what you can control, and all I can control is like being the model citizen or whatever, like doing my part, and then leaving the rest up to some kind of faith or trust. And uh, I think I think we would all agree that the people who live in constant like distrust, you know, they're living a more miserable existence than one of like faith and trust. Yeah, I think also just like one of the really biggest impacts that SPX had was this other understanding of like spirituality and religion and really just like faith. Because as like quite a rational, skeptical person, it's like you almost instantly discount the power of faith or power of belief, right? Like things like manifestation or like the girl science. If you're a rational, logical person, these things are just like way too intangible. But clearly, like religion and the spiritual has had immense value, has been immensely important for the development of civilization. So really kind of understanding the value of belief, that's probably the biggest takeaway or the biggest thing that like SPX taught me.
Yeah, like it's interesting that you say that, because one thing I've come to appreciate more, I would say in the last 2 years, as I've thought about this more deeply, is the like memetic reflexivity of faith. So it's like by having faith, you're actually increasing sort of like the likelihood that there is something to be faithful in. Does that make sense?
Yeah. There's this like virtuous cycle.
There's this virtuous cycle. It is also sort of like contagious. Like when people have faith and then they live in a way that is consistent, where it's like, I say something and I do the same thing. That is sort of like a commitment to faith, but something that can be observed in reality. And then that is like, from there, like contagious. And I think that's that's something I see happening here too.
I think the counterpoint is that that's like cultish behavior, right?
Yes. Yeah, I think that like I could probably go on a long. I sort of think lots of things are cults, like almost almost everything is a cult, which is a longer discussion. But
it's a loaded word.
There's so much negative connotation of the term cult. But I mean, there's so many. I think about, like, I'm a huge soccer / football fan. Like, every one of the teams that I follow in any capacity has a massive cult behind it.
Yeah, I would argue those are the most successful cults, if we're going to use that word. I would say sports fandom for whatever team.
I think that's what a lot of people are missing in a way, right? Like, a lot of people don't have their cult, or they don't have their like, their sports team that they can stand behind, and they look for that in a lot of other ways.
Yeah, I think like everything you all just mentioned, kind of, I boil it down to like the very simple concept that you kind of alluded to at the beginning of this, Munchies, when you were talking about like your brief era in VC, which is something like crypto, I think, specifically misconstrues a lot, which is that these things like have to solve real problems. And like you guys just said, that people are looking for these things. They're looking for generosity. They're looking for faith. They're looking for something to believe in, escapism, whatever. You can an RPG that's pseudo real life, pseudo not, right? But they have to solve real problems. If they don't solve real problems, then they're worthless, or maybe they're worth something that should be less. I don't know. They're not going to go up. I can tell you that.
Yeah.
And also the asset overproduction that has occurred via Pump Fund and all these launch pads also has occurred in private markets of early stage companies. There's way more startups than there used to be. This is just kind of a byproduct of like a generational movement toward equity-based wealth creation. And you have to find signal through the noise, and that signal is things that solve real problems, which means you have to understand what problems exist. So I think that point is really important, and you can tell from I don't want to sound like big brothery, but like kind of the social monitoring, I guess, of a lot of Aeons, and especially over the last like 6 months, a lot of the new SPX entrants, that this is affecting their life in a very positive way. Like, it's very easy to see that.
Yeah, like Cal, I would just add on to that, like going back to the cult thing, like, call it whatever you want, call it a cult. But the reality is these are just sort of like latent shared beliefs that exist within society that there's no organizing framework around.
Yes.
Like, so like you could say that about everything. You could be like, why do we eat 3 square meals a day? Like, like why do we space them out by these? Like, everything is sort of like an organizing framework around something that makes sense for people. And that's all we're really talking about here.
The 3 meal a day cult. I don't want in on that. I'm out.
2 meal a day.
Cult behavior. He had 3 meals, cult behavior. I think I keep witnessing Tanz's power go out live, I think.
Yeah, I know. I'm just wondering how we're going to end the stream if it's on his computer. We got to try to get Mike Flip the Stocks in here. He'll run this thing for a couple of days straight.
Munchies, let me ask you, what is, over the last year or so, maybe it's a little more, post Murad, like what are you proudest of in the evolution of the SPX community, and like what are you looking for as kind of a next step?
What am I proudest of? There's just there's been so many things that I've lost count, and I'm just like proud of all of it, right? Like this podcast, all the podcasts, all the people doing events. It's really hard to just pinpoint one proudest because they're all different and they're all like individual expressions, if that makes sense. Like one of the core things that makes this so powerful, I think, is um, a lot of people have never been on social media, never done anything, made any videos, done any creation, and I guess that's like the status quo for social media, right? Like we're all consumers, and there's this shift to creation, which is subtle at first. Like you just start posting one day, and then you're fully kind of expressing this other side of um, this other side of you that you didn't even know existed. And some people find that they're really good podcasters, or they're really good at making like I think Arcane Vault. He made his first video. Uh, like it was like after a month or something that he was just playing around with these apps and was just making like incredible stuff.
Yeah, dude, we should
Like
shout him out right now. He spends how
yeah,
much did he say? Like 40 to 120 hours on a video. Did I read that right? I might have read that wrong. I don't think I did. Each one of those videos that he's made. I mean, they are
yeah.
truly incredible, but that is
And
impressive.
from what I gathered, he just like started with like it was just like a inborn talent that he just discovered through SPX because he hadn't made any videos prior. And now he's like one of the best video creators, probably not just in SPX, probably just like in all of social media, all of X. So that seeing that kind of expression, people just like breaking through the big tech status quo and being themselves, like it feels like a piece of the internet has been given back to us that was taken away for the longest time. Um, that's super inspiring. I think I've always been massive on IRL events. I should probably go to more when I have time, but like the experience, like I met up with some eons, and it is another whole experience. Feels kind of surreal, and just brings everything together. Um, so yeah, want to see more of that, more of just uh, more of more of people going out and like engaging with their own lives in a healthy sense. Like, you know, I think one framework I like to think about is like with SPX, your financial concerns are they're kind of not they shouldn't weigh on you as much anymore because if we have this like community of people who they're very switched on financially, they're like people like yourselves. You shouldn't have like we shouldn't be living in a world where just to get by you have to work your full-time job, but then also be some kind of have some professional level understanding of finance and economics and investment, right? Like that's a very inefficient way to run society. There should be kind of a joint communal security fund that everyone that you can have access to. You're trusted to have access to this security fund, but you only use it when you need to, and like that could solve so many of the lower levels of matter hierarchy where like everyone's kind of invested into this insurance fund, and as it grows, everyone grows with it. And these are some of like the ways I think SPX can evolve for people.
Yeah. Tans, Tans has said in the past, like, SPX could collapse Maslow's hierarchy of needs into one flat section. And when you think about that concept, you're like, okay, whoa, that's like kind of a, like a wild statement.
Yeah.
Even as I thought about it, then I thought about it with my own experiences with Bitcoin, and it happened. Like it happened for me. Like so, it's possible, and so that's not just like something that is a pie in the sky concept that is unattainable. It's possible, and I've seen it happen for early Bitcoiners, and I've witnessed it, and it's really cool to see. Um, to your point, Munchies, of like just going out and living your life, and like the financial aspect is not so important. Like these things are sort of happening simultaneously. It's cool to see people like Ruben and Seb like going and building a friendship in London and hanging out and having like fun doing these types of things. It's cool to see 1% Aeon and Eternal Bull on the West Coast in Seattle, like going out and building a friendship and meeting new people. And so while also kind of working for this financial layer simultaneously. And so like I think these are actually just like examples of that is possible.
Yeah, and bringing people together and also aligning them on the core things that we all share, while making the differences seem like insignificant is another cool.
Hey guys, I actually have to hop. I just wanted to say this was awesome. Munchies, I appreciate you. I'm so glad I got to be here. Yeah, my daughter's screaming. Sorry, but
Like the
yeah.
Halloween decoration.
Yeah, thanks. That's I just realized that was there. That's my son's trick or treat basket. He was supposed to bring that to school today. Whoops. All right, but yeah, I love you guys. Persist forever.
See you much.
See you much.
So, Cal, do we think Tans is coming back, or
I don't know. I don't think it's up to him.
Yeah, probably not.
I think if he had a say, probably. But
well, Munchies, I know it's late at night there, and we've been on for an hour and a half. But thank you so much for your time, for your perspective, for sharing your early experiences. I think it's like awesome to hear the stories of someone who's been there, through the entirety of kind of SPX's journey. And so really, really appreciate you coming on late at night and sharing your.
Thanks for having me. I hope it was interesting.
yeah, I honestly, I've looked up to you for a long time, Munchies. I can tell by the way you think that, like, where you're at, your frequency is like where I would like to be. And I feel like I've been inching closer and closer to that, but it's from people like you and Mung and the Nicoles, et cetera, that have kind of helped me. So I appreciate your kind of, even if it's indirect, like your guidance to the general community and what we're trying to do. And I can just tell this is going to be one that I'm going to have to re-listen to fully, capture all the thoughts that you had. Cause I think you had some really, really great ones. I'm going to do my best to clip this up a bit because I think that we have to propagate some of these ideas.
Yeah, I know that.
Thanks for the kind words.
Yeah, of course. I mean, and I also think that in terms of next steps, like your wishes are definitely going to come true for sure. For SPX, I should say.
Yeah, I mean, I thank you guys as well, Cal, Matt, Tanj, Munch. I think putting a face and having having your backgrounds, it really does contribute like a lot to the movement. I think, I hadn't done I hadn't really been on many spaces or podcasts prior to this. I think also it was just I was just deciding based on my intuition or my instincts, and this was super fun. I think in the future we can revisit some of the thoughts. I feel like there's a lot of thoughts in my head, probably still like, maybe maybe it's not you that found it hard to understand, but there's just a lot of like a lot of overlapping trends that I would think about that I may need to like express more gradually.
Yeah, that's great. And Munchies, I put out a tweet like a while ago, something along the lines of, I think some of the best thinkers I know in the industry are in SPX, and I was thinking about you amongst others as part of that. And I can't tell you how many times I go and read one of your tweets, and I have sort of like an initial reaction to it, and then I'm like, oh wait, I think I missed the entirety of what he was trying to say. Like, let me go back and read it again, and I have these aha moments where I can really sort of understand your perspective. So keep doing it. The community loves it, and really appreciate having you on today.
Yeah, thank you so
Thanks,
much.
guys.